The world of machinery is often one of precision, calculation, and rules. But sometimes, greatness is born not from conformity, but from audacity, obsession, and a touch of madness. In a small, unassuming garage tucked away in the heart of an industrial town, one man would soon rewrite what it meant to be an engineer, to be a mechanic, and to defy the limits of possibility. This is the story of the mad mechanic who turned a broken tank into an engineering legend. The story begins decades ago, when the clatter of hammers, the hiss of steam, and the smell of oil were not just part of life, they were the very air the townspeople breathed. Among them lived a man whose mind never rested. From an early age, he was fascinated by machines, not the gleaming, polished machines seen in museums, but the broken, discarded, forgotten ones. While others saw scrap, he saw potential. A twisted axle, a rusted engine, a dented chassis, all of these were, to him, challenges waiting to be conquered. He was not a man of wealth, nor one of privilege. His world was made of hands blackened with grease, of sleepless nights in dimly lit workshops, and of the relentless pursuit of understanding how things worked. But what set him apart was his refusal to accept limitations. Where engineers followed manuals, he experimented. Where mechanics repaired, he reinvented. And where society scoffed at failure, he embraced it as a teacher. It was in this spirit that he stumbled upon his greatest challenge, a tank. Not just any tank, but one that had seen decades of war. A machine so battered that even the military engineers had deemed it beyond repair. Its metal hull was scarred with bullet holes, its engine frozen solid with years of neglect, its treads twisted and broken. Many had walked past it, shaking their heads, thinking it was nothing more than a relic of a violent past. But to him, it was a canvas. What drew him to that tank was not just its size or its complexity, it was the story it carried. Each dent, each scorch mark told of battles fought, of lives changed, and of history itself. He saw it not as a machine, but as a living testament to human ingenuity and resilience. And in that vision, he saw an opportunity to take the impossible and make it extraordinary. People in the town whispered about him. Mad, they said. Obsessed, they muttered. But he wore those labels like badges of honor. Every morning, long before the sun rose, he would enter his workshop, the tank looming in the center like a sleeping giant. With steady hands and an unyielding mind, he began to examine it, piece by piece, bolt by bolt, and gear by gear. What he did next would begin to blur the line between genius and madness. The first challenge was the engine. It was a behemoth, an intricate puzzle of pistons, rods, and chambers all frozen by years of rust and neglect. Any ordinary mechanic would have replaced it or abandoned the project altogether. But he had no interest in ordinary. He spent weeks studying old schematics, sketching his own designs, and fabricating parts from scrap metal. Sometimes he would work late into the night, guided only by the flicker of a single lamp, talking to himself as though the machine could understand him. And then there were the treads. They were warped beyond recognition, the rubber long gone, the metal links twisted and broken. People would come by, watch him hammering, welding, and bending the pieces back into shape, and shake their heads. It can't be done, they said. But he smiled at them quietly, the sound of hammers and sparks more comforting than their voices. Every day he chipped away at impossibility, until slowly the tank began to move, not yet alive, but awakening. It wasn't just the mechanics that were remarkable, it was his imagination. Where a traditional engineer saw limits, he saw possibilities. He experimented with unconventional fuels, modified the hydraulics in ways no manual had ever suggested, and even redesigned the turret mechanism entirely. Some nights, neighbors would hear strange sounds, explosions that were only controlled test, strange whirring noises, and sparks that flew like fireworks in the darkness. And still, he persisted, knowing that every experiment, no matter how small, was a step toward transformation. Yet, for all his brilliance, he faced setbacks that would have crushed any ordinary person. Parts would fail, engines would seize, metal would crack. And each failure came with a heavy cost, not just in money or materials, but in morale. Friends and neighbors began to distance themselves, calling him reckless, foolish, even dangerous. He became a solitary figure, wandering among the twisted remnants of what others had discarded, speaking a language only he understood. But in that solitude, he found freedom. Free to experiment, free to fail, and free to invent. By the time the first winter approached, the tank was no longer just a heap of metal. Its engine roared to life under his hands, a deep, guttural sound that seemed to echo across the town, announcing that the impossible was becoming real. The treads, once twisted and useless, now clamped onto the ground with mechanical precision. Every bolt he had replaced, every piece he had reforged, glinted with the story of relentless effort. And yet, the tank was not perfect. It was still an imperfect marvel, a testament to trial and error, to human determination, and to the mind of a man who refused to accept defeat. The townspeople began to take notice, some with skepticism, others with awe. Children would peek through fences to see him working, captivated by the sheer scale of the endeavor. Older mechanics, once critical, now nodded quietly, realizing that something extraordinary was unfolding before their eyes. And in the quiet moments, as he sat atop the tank watching the sunset reflect off its scarred metal, he would whisper to it as though it were a living companion. "We're going to make history," he would say, and the tank seemed, somehow, to respond with a deep, echoing growl. It was not just the physical work that set him apart, it was the vision. While others saw a broken relic of war, he saw a legend in waiting. He imagined it moving across landscapes, demonstrating engineering feats never before seen. He imagined people coming from far and wide to witness what he had accomplished. And he imagined that in that machine, his obsession, his genius, and yes, his madness would all be immortalized. What makes a legend? Is it talent? Is it determination? Or is it the refusal to give up when every voice around you says you should? For him, it was all of these wrapped into one unstoppable force. And as the first part of this story comes to a close, we see not just a man and a machine, but a partnership, a bond forged in sweat, fire, and relentless ingenuity. Soon, the world will come to know the mad, mechanic, and the tank that refused to die. But that story is not for now. For now, we simply witness the birth of a dream, the quiet moments before history is made, and the relentless heartbeat of a man who dared to turn the impossible into reality. In the next chapter, we will follow him as the tank begins to take shape, as the experiments become more daring, and as the legend grows, drawing attention from skeptics, experts, and history itself. This is where the ordinary ends and the extraordinary begins. By the time spring arrived, the tank was no longer a silent relic. It had begun to breathe under the hands of the mad mechanic. The engine, once a frozen relic of rust and decay, now hummed with a deep, rhythmic pulse, a heartbeat of metal and ingenuity. Each movement of the treads across the dirt floor of the workshop sent a tremor of excitement through him, a vibration not of fear or fatigue, but of triumph. The transformation, however, was far from complete. The challenges ahead were formidable, and each day seemed to bring new problems that defied conventional wisdom. The turret refused to rotate smoothly, the suspension groaned under weight it was never meant to carry, and the electrical system sparked and flickered with an almost mischievous life of its own. Most engineers would have thrown in the towel, but not him. Every problem was a puzzle, and every puzzle was a chance to innovate. He began experimenting in ways that were, at times, reckless but brilliant. He rewired circuits using scrap wires salvaged from old radios. He replaced hydraulic pumps with improvised mechanisms built from bicycle parts and metal piping. He tested new fuel mixtures in secret, watching flames leap in bursts that illuminated the dark workshop like lightning in a storm. Each test carried risk, and yet each risk brought him closer to mastery. He had developed an uncanny sense of the machine's soul, how it reacted to pressure, how it strained under stress, and how it could be coaxed into exceeding expectations. The townspeople, once skeptical, could no longer ignore what was happening. Word spread quickly, carried by whispers and wide-eyed children. "He's actually making it work," they said. "The tank, it moves." Curiosity turned into fascination. Mechanics from neighboring towns began to visit cautiously at first, expecting to see failure. But one by one, their skepticism turned to awe. They had never seen engineering applied in such unorthodox ways. He was bending metal, electricity, and fuel to his will, combining ingenuity with sheer determination in ways that defied logic. What truly set him apart was not just skill, but vision. While the tank was being repaired, he was already planning improvements no one else would dare imagine. He reinforced the chassis using techniques learned from observing animals, how bones absorb impact, how joints flex and rotate. He developed suspension systems that could handle rough terrain, giving the tank mobility that even modern design struggled to achieve. He redesigned the interior, making it not only functional but intuitive, allowing a single operator to manage complex systems with minimal effort. He experimented with armor plating, fashioning it from scrap metals of various thicknesses and densities, layering them to create a shield that was both lightweight and incredibly resilient. The tank became more than a repaired machine. It became a hybrid of engineering history and forward-thinking innovation. Every weld, every bolt, every modification told a story of persistence and creativity. Perhaps the most extraordinary aspect of this journey was his relationship with the tank itself. He talked to it not jokingly, but as if it were a sentient partner in his work. "Hold together for me," he would mutter while tightening a bolt. "We're not done yet." And in many ways, it seemed as if the tank responded. After each long night of work, after each adjustment and repair, it moved a little smoother, roared a little stronger, and seemed to grow in character and strength. It was no longer just metal. It was an extension of his mind and soul. Even amidst the progress, there were moments of despair. Engines failed during critical tests, welds cracked under stress, and the ground beneath his experiments often bore the marks of near catastrophes. Yet he persisted, fueled not just by ambition, but by obsession. Each failure became a lesson, each setback a stepping stone. Neighbors began to realize that this obsession was not madness, it was a relentless pursuit of excellence. As the months wore on, the tank evolved beyond anything anyone had imagined. It was faster, stronger, and more maneuverable than the original design. It could traverse rough terrain with ease, its weapon systems functioned flawlessly, and its engine had a power-to-weight ratio that defied expectations. Experts who came to inspect it could only shake their heads in disbelief. What had started as a broken relic of war had become an engineering marvel, a testament to the ingenuity of a single man who refused to accept limits. Alongside the physical transformation came lessons in history and engineering. He studied old war manuals, dissected historical failures, and researched experimental designs that never left the drawing board. He borrowed ideas from tanks, trains, and even aircraft, synthesizing them into a singular creation. Every day, the workshop was a classroom, a laboratory, and a battlefield, all at once. His methods were unconventional. Some nights, sparks would fly in showers, and strange noises would echo across the town. Neighbors would peer through windows, curious and concerned. But those who dared to enter the workshop could see the genius at work, the intricate interplay of gears, hydraulics, and ingenuity. They saw the evidence that, sometimes, to create something truly extraordinary, rules must be bent, risk embraced, and imagination unleashed. Stories of his work began to reach far beyond the town. Local journalists caught wind of the man who had resurrected a dead tank, and soon the story spread to national papers. People debated his methods, questioned his sanity, and marveled at his results. Engineers, historians, and enthusiasts alike were drawn to the legend, eager to witness the machine that had risen from rust and ruin into a symbol of human creativity and tenacity. Yet, despite the growing fame, he remained focused on the work itself. The attention, the accolades, and the whispers of genius were secondary to the task at hand. The tank was not a trophy. It was a challenge, a partner, and a testament to what one person could accomplish when driven by vision and relentless dedication. Every day brought new experiments, new improvements, and new surprises. It was a living machine, evolving with its creator, adapting to new ideas, and defying the expectations of everyone who saw it. Perhaps the most fascinating part of the story was how he combined practicality with innovation. Many of his designs were inspired by necessity. When parts were missing, he would invent replacements from everyday objects. When engines threatened to overheat, he would design improvised cooling systems that worked better than some factory originals. He approached every problem with curiosity and courage, unafraid of failure and unrelenting in pursuit of perfection. The legend of the mad mechanic and his tank began to take shape not just in metal, but in the imagination of all who witnessed it. The tank became more than a machine. It became a symbol of perseverance, ingenuity, and the power of a human mind that refused to yield. And yet, even as the work reached unprecedented heights, the final challenges loomed, the moments that would test everything he had built and everything he believed. Soon, the tank would leave the workshop, and the world outside would see what had been forged in shadows, sparks, and obsession. What seemed impossible to the experts, skeptics, and the ordinary man was now a tangible reality. But no one, not even the mad mechanic himself, could have predicted the reaction it would provoke, or the ways in which it would change the perception of what a single person could achieve. In the final chapter, we will witness the climax of this incredible journey. The tank will be tested beyond its limits, the genius of the mechanic pushed to the edge, and the world will finally recognize the legend that had been quietly built in a small, unassuming workshop. Triumph, danger, and history itself await, and the story of the mad mechanic reaches heights no one could have imagined. The morning the tank was finally ready to leave the workshop, the air was electric. The mad mechanic had worked for months, almost years, on this impossible creation, and now the moment had arrived. The ground beneath it trembled as the massive treads rolled forward, smooth and powerful, defying all expectations. Dust swirled around the machine like a living entity awakening from a long slumber. Neighbors and visitors gathered at a safe distance, unsure whether to cheer or fear what they were about to witness. As he climbed atop the tank, wrench in hand and eyes blazing with determination, it became clear that this was more than a test, it was a statement. Every modification, every welded seam, every improvised innovation was about to face its ultimate trial. The tank would no longer exist in the safety of his workshop. It would confront the unpredictability of the world outside, the harshness of terrain, and the scrutiny of skeptical eyes. And yet, he was undeterred. To him, the risk was part of the thrill. Failure had taught him more than success ever could, and now victory was within reach. The first trial was terrain that no ordinary tank could traverse. Rocks, ditches, uneven ground obstacles that had defeated generations of engineers before him. The tank moved forward, groaning under its weight, but it did not falter. It climbed, it twisted, it adapted. The suspension absorbed the shocks with almost unnatural precision, the treads gripping the earth like claws. Onlookers gasped as the once broken relic defied gravity, physics, and expectation. It was no longer just a tank, it was a testament to human ingenuity, to obsession, and to the relentless spirit of one man who refused to give up. And then came the engine test. He had pushed it beyond the limits of its original design, experimenting with fuel mixtures, turbocharging, and improvisations that engineers deemed impossible. Now it roared, alive and ferocious, responding to commands as if it understood the urgency of the moment. Flames licked from the exhaust, smoke curled into the sky, and yet the tank ran smoothly, powerfully, magnificently. Each gear shifted perfectly, each system responded instantly, and every component worked in harmony. What was once broken was now legendary. But the true climax lay in the tank's maneuverability and resilience. The mechanic had devised tests that no ordinary engineer would dare attempt: sudden drops, sharp turns, and obstacles designed to crush ordinary machines. As the tank navigated these challenges, it became apparent that this was no ordinary vehicle. Its design, forged from necessity, creativity, and sheer audacity, allowed it to perform feats that were thought impossible. Observers whispered in awe, their earlier skepticism transformed into admiration, disbelief giving way to wonder. Yet, beyond the mechanics, beyond the technical marvel, lay the human story, the obsession, the isolation, the relentless drive to create something extraordinary. Every sleepless night, every spark that flew dangerously close to disaster, every failure that could have ended the project had built something far greater than metal. It was a monument to persistence, to imagination, and to the refusal to surrender to doubt. The tank was not merely restored, it had been reborn, transformed by the mind of a man who dared to dream beyond limits. News of the tank's transformation spread like wildfire. Journalists arrived from cities miles away, historians and engineers traveled to witness it firsthand, and enthusiasts shared stories of the mad mechanic whose obsession had created a legend. Everyone wanted to see the machine, to touch the metal, to feel the power that had been coaxed from a relic of war. And yet, for all the attention, the mechanic remained focused, eyes fixed on the tank, hands steady, mind racing with ideas for the next improvement, the next challenge, the next experiment. The climax of the story was not just the tank's performance, but the recognition that it symbolized. It was proof that a single human mind, driven by obsession and courage, could achieve the extraordinary. It was a lesson in perseverance, in creativity, and in the power of refusing to accept limitations. Where others saw failure, he saw opportunity. Where others saw scrap, he saw potential. And where the world saw a broken machine, he created a legend. In the years that followed, the tank became more than just a remarkable machine. It became a symbol of possibility. People studied its design, marveled at its innovations, and were inspired by the story of the man who had brought it to life. He never sought fame, never sought accolades. The satisfaction came from the work itself, from the knowledge that he had pushed the boundaries of engineering and imagination to create something truly unique. His story reminds us that greatness often comes from those who are willing to tread paths others fear to explore. That innovation often requires bending rules, embracing risk, and committing wholeheartedly to a vision that others cannot yet see. That obsession, when channeled with skill and determination, can transform the impossible into reality. And most importantly, that legends are not born. They are forged in sweat, sparks, and the relentless pursuit of a dream. Today, the mad mechanic and his tank are remembered not just as a tale of engineering genius, but as an enduring testament to human potential. His workshop may have long since quieted, the hammers and sparks replaced by silence, but the legacy remains a legend etched into steel, into history, and into the imagination of all who hear his story. As we leave the world of the mad mechanic behind, we are reminded that inspiration can come from the most unexpected places: a broken machine, a small garage, and a mind unwilling to accept limits. It is a story that encourages us to see potential where others see decay, to pursue dreams others call impossible, and to create our own legends, one bold step at a time. The tank, now a symbol of innovation and audacity, stands as a reminder that sometimes the line between madness and genius is not only thin, it is where history is made. And in that line, in that space of courage and vision, the mad mechanic found his calling, his purpose, and his immortality. This is not just the story of a man in a tank. It is the story of what happens when human will meets unyielding determination. It is the story of how one individual, refusing to accept the limits imposed by the world, can create something extraordinary. And it is a story that will continue to inspire anyone who dares to dream, to tinker, to fail, and to rise again, turning the impossible into a legend.